98.1 KZE, good afternoon and welcome back. This is Will with you here. My guest this afternoon, Eddie Egan. He is one of the stars of The Last 5 Years, which is playing right now at the Shadowland Theatre in Ellenville, New York. You can go to shadowlandtheatre.org for tickets and more info. Again, it's The Last 5 Years, running now through September 27th. Eddie, welcome to the program.
Thanks a lot. It's good to be here.
Thanks for taking the time to actually come to the studio and be in the flesh here with us. That's a great accomplishment, I would say, because you're right in the middle of a theatrical run. That's a big deal for you to take time away and come to KZE.
Yeah, no, but it's a pleasure. I mean, you guys have a great studio here, and I love talking about the show. So,
what is it like? If we just before, I want to get into the specifics of The Last 5 Years in a moment, but I imagine what I've heard from actors before is that a lot of the maybe the intensity and the chaos comes in the run up to the actual run, and that once you get into the run, there's more of a sort of a regular rhythm to things.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. It's funny, we were really lucky with our director on this piece. His name's Michael LaFleur, and because there's only two of us in the cast, there was a lot more time for us to play. You know what I mean? There weren't any big musical numbers that needed to be choreographed or this and that. It was about us. So we really got a lot of playtime and got to do our own thing and find the show kind of organically, and then there came a point in the rehearsal process when Michael was like, okay, you guys, we got to, we need to set stuff now. But that's exactly right. You play, you find the levels, you find where it needs to go, and then you kind of hammer stuff down. Yeah.
Let's talk about The Last 5 Years. I think this is a story that it will be good. You kind of pointed this out as we were getting to know each other. It'll be good for an audience to have some sort of sense of what's going on before they sit down. Not that they need it, but it might help. There's a really great hook the way that this is structured, this musical.
Yeah, it's really a remarkable piece. It tells the story of a relationship between two young couples in New York over a 5-year span. But the interesting thing about the presentation is that Kathy, the female character, she tells her story from the end of the relationship in reverse. Spoiler alert, you find out in the first song.
Yeah,
that's great. And Jamie, my character, starts at the beginning of the relationship, the young love era, and then progresses in real time forward. So there's this interesting crossing of the stories across a time plane, which makes it more effective, I think.
And you're getting different perspectives on this relationship, and things aren't always they're not really overlapping, I guess.
Not really. It's funny. You kind of discover as the show goes what went wrong in the relationship. So it's kind of a investigative journey the audience takes to see what went wrong. And there's only really one part in the show when the stories intersect in time, and it's during their wedding ceremony. It's when the stories cross at the happiest point.
Yeah, in the midsection.
Yeah, and then they kind of just drift away, which is interesting. It's an interesting little metaphor.
What do you and your co-star do to prepare for this performance? Where there's got to be sort of the weight of history in a relationship. At the same time, there isn't a ton of interaction.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We spend a lot of time on stage. There are moments where we have to create the other person in front of us singing, but the director has done a really great job for the audience and for the actors of placing the secondary character in each scene actually on stage, softly lit, to show that it is the other character's memory and their point of view. But it's great to still have a physical body there, to react and play with. And a lot of times when the show's done, there's really not much of that at all. So we think it makes it a lot clearer, and it helps us on the journey of the story too, on stage.
Yeah, it's really I love the idea behind the structure of this play. It's another thing as I mentioned to you as we're getting to know each other. I wish I had thought of it. It's such a great pull,
very clever
for the way to tell a story. And I'm guessing that there are points in which these two characters remember things very differently, and we're going to see conflicting accounts.
Yeah,
like in any relationship.
And that's the great thing about it too. It gives the show another dimension of telling the audience that there might not be a bad guy here. You figure out who's more at fault. At the same time, also there's like times when what's coming and the character doesn't.
Yeah.
So as an audience member, there's a lot of foreshadowing that you get.
Sure.
Which makes it interesting. Yeah.
My guest this afternoon, actor Eddie Egan. You can see him as a part of the last 5 years. It's running right now at the Shadowland Theatre in Ellenville, New York, right now through the 27th. Shadowlandtheatre.org for tickets, all the info that you might need. Again, it's the last 5 years. You mentioned to me that this is, we know it's a musical, but that really you're almost, most of the communication is through song.
Yeah, and luckily we're in great hands with the music. Jason Robert Brown is a really, really well-renowned composer, and he's brilliant. He's very actor-friendly in the way he writes. It's very conversational, very organic, and he writes over a span of many styles, so it's a very eclectic mix of music too. Yeah, it's really nice.
How does the amount of sort of music, in terms of the percentage of the story, how does that compare to musicals that you were comfortable with or that you were familiar with and had been a part of before?
Yeah, it's funny. There's been a lot of recent projects I worked on that it was almost all sung, like Miss Saigon,
okay,
which is kind of in the vein of like Les Mis, where it's pretty much like an operetta. A brilliant piece called Next to Normal, which again is another almost entirely sung through. There are some scenes. So yeah, it's kind of funny. It's kind of been a pattern, and I love it. I especially if the music's right, it's a really effective and strong way to tell a story.
Something that's always been impressive to me that I think sometimes we forget about when we're sitting in a theater is the sort of athletic element of musicals, whether it's the dancing or even the singing.
Yeah.
When you're singing that much, is there anything that you have to do to prepare for like lung capacity?
I find it helpful when I'm working on a show like this where I know I'm really going to be singing a lot. It's just it's an extra motivation to go out and go for a jog, on the morning of a show day. Get the blood flowing because your whole body works together in that regard. So it's good to keep the energy up and get that breathing control, because that's where in a piece like this, if you don't have that stamina built up, you can really lose your breath.
Do you find that feeling in your body changing as the preparation continues as you're going into a show?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Rehearsals are a learning process, and you put things on their feet and it changes from when you're just standing around the piano. So you have to find those new places to breathe and make sure, you set those checkpoints for yourself and lock them in. It's like muscle memory. You know, it's and it just eventually all locks in. But yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into making sure I can sing that line without running out of breath.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming in and hanging out with us again. Eddie Egan, actor Eddie Egan, you can see him as a part of the last 5 years, running right now through the 27th, Shadowland Theatre in Ellenville, New York. Shadowlandtheatre.org for tickets and more info. You mentioned, I think, about 4 or 5 shows left. 4 shows left.
4 more shows, yeah. Thursday through Saturday night at 8 p.m. and Sunday at 2 p.m. for our closing matinee.
And again, it's the last 5 years at Shadowland Theatre in Ellenville, New York. Eddie Egan, thanks so much for taking the time to come here to KZE and hang out with us and talk about this show.
My pleasure.
It's 98.1 KZE.